Thank you, Mr. Chair. In 2017, the Republican theory was cut taxes on large corporations and cut taxes on the profits they make overseas, and hope those companies will put their increased profits into new investments. In 21 and 22, we took a different direction. We invested in the nation's infrastructure. We invested in manufacturing, in industries that are poised to promote good jobs in the future, clean energy, advanced manufacturing, semiconductors, and others. I'm a former mayor and governor, which means I still kind of think of myself as an economic developer, so I'm making pitches all the time to companies about why to come to Virginia. I'm on the phone at least once a week with some company trying to make a pitch. I was on the phone with a company yesterday who's really excited about some of the clean energy provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act and some of the other investments in the infrastructure bill. Talk about these two visions, that, cut taxes and count on companies making more to help grow the economy versus direct investment in infrastructure and manufacturing. It's going to be a great case study. It may take another 10 or 15 years for people to really write the case study, but if I could begin with you, Dr. Clausing, talk about these two visions for growing the economy and growing prosperity for everyday Americans.
Yes, I think when we saw the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act enacted, there was a big debate about whether it would pay for itself, which it didn't, whether it would spur a new renaissance in wage growth and investment, which it did not. There was a lot of evidence that it increased shareholder value in the run-up to the legislation. The stock market soared. It increased buybacks a lot, but there was very little discernible effect on aggregate investment in the United States, and I think that was partly because of the fact that a lot of this tax cut was directed at these excess profits. And when you cut someone's taxes on their excess profits and they have extra money, they're already undertaking all the investments that they thought were rational to take. And so when you look at the benefits from that legislation, study after study has found that it mostly enriched shareholders and it didn't really trickle down to the typical worker. I think the vision of more recent legislation, starting with the infrastructure bill, it was a bipartisan bill, but also the CHIPS Act, which was bipartisan, and the Inflation Reduction Act, these are more about, I would call them a more modern supply side economics, or Secretary Yellen calls it that, so I'm really borrowing that term from her, in the sense that it's focused on really investing in the fundamentals of the United States, focusing on the people, the infrastructure, building up the United States to have those fundamental strengths so that we can compete in the world economy. And to be a fundamentally strong economy, we need adequate tax revenue to pay for these kinds of investments, which I think Mr. Hausman pointed to as well. So I think those types of investments are very useful in making our businesses work well if they have the infrastructure and the human capital that they need.
And Mr. Hausman, from workers' standpoint, and I'm proud to be a senator from a state where the largest steelworkers union in the International is located at our shipyard in Newport News. Talk about these two strategies, cutting corporate taxes versus investing in infrastructure and manufacturing, and how they affect working people.
Yeah, I mean, I think, historical precedent when we did rural electrification, when we've now trying to do that with broadband expansion across the country. I mean, it gets people into the economy, gets them productive, gets them active, and it gives them the opportunity to participate in their democracy. And I think that that's ultimately one of the key pieces here when we talk about these direct investments towards communities in need. The idea, maybe I'm a little old school, where I think it's important that every child gets every meal, and that everyone doesn't have to fret about the bills. And when we do direct investment and encourage good quality jobs, unionized jobs, we create an incentive out there in the economy that is so much more powerful than a corporate tax cut for the wealthiest people.
Just one thing before I hand it back to you, Mr. Chair. I remember the evening we voted on the bill in 2017, we got handed the bill, and we're told we had to vote on it right away. Most of us hadn't seen it. It still had handwritten interlineations that were hard to decipher. And then we got a chance to make amendments where we could speak for 1 minute and then have a vote on an amendment. My corporations in Virginia, they liked the notion the corporate tax was going down, but they weren't asking for it at 21. They were saying, can you do it at 25 or 26? And so I proposed an amendment that night, recognizing that the corporate tax cuts in the proposal were permanent, but the individual tax cuts were temporary. I said, well, why don't you just take the corporate tax rate, if you're going to do it and you're going to drop it to 25 or 26, and then make the individual tax cuts permanent. And that got roundly voted down by my Republican colleagues, demonstrating that the preference was not to really assist the individuals in the tax code, but to assist corporations. I still don't know that it would have been that great a bill, but it would have been a lot better bill if we had rebalanced it more to focus on individuals rather than on corporations. Thanks, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Senator Kaine.